Between 1914 and 1929, in a city in central Hungary called Negatív, a group of women were inspired by a quote-unquote wise woman to start using arsenic to poison people. Together, these women killed an estimated 300 people via poisoning. This is a story of the Hungarian women that earned the title of the Angel Makers. In 1911, a woman named Zsuzsanna Fazekas strolled into the town of Negatív and proclaimed that she was a talented midwife. When asked why her husband was not with her, she simply said that he disappeared and offered no further information or explanation. Before you say, well, maybe she was just single, that really wasn't an option in Hungary at the time. Young women had their husbands selected for them by their own families, and divorce was simply not an option. During World War I, all the Hungarian men that were capable of fighting were sent off to the front lines. Given the centralized location of Negatív, it was an ideal place to house POWs. Even though the POWs had minimal freedoms in the village, many managed to find their way into the beds of local women. Since it would be hard for the village women to hide the fact that they had become pregnant while their husbands were away, many women asked the mysterious midwife for help. Zsuzsanna was happy to oblige these women with primitive and illegal abortions. This resulted in Zsuzsanna getting jailed 10 times, but she never got convicted for any of her crimes. When the men had returned from World War I, many of the village women were stuck in their unhappy situations again. Some women even confessed that they had cheated on their husbands with enemy soldiers in hopes that their husbands would kick them out. However, the battle-scarred men didn't really care, and they just wished to return to their pre-war lives. Feeling trapped, the village women went back to the sketchy midwife for help, and again, she was happy to oblige. Zsuzsanna's response to these women was, why deal with them? Zsuzsanna taught the women how to acquire arsenic by boiling flypaper and collecting the arsenic-rich residue. Suddenly, many men from the village had become sick and eventually died. These deaths were hard to investigate given the fact that poisonous gas was so widely used in World War I, and the deaths could be attributed to gas exposure. Sadly, these women didn't stop killing after their husbands. Many women began to kill their lovers, people from the village, and even family members they didn't like, up to and including children and parents. Sometimes the parents were just a burden for the women, and other times they were killed for the inheritance money that they would leave behind. Poisoning people had become a popular pastime in the village. Most women were doing it. In the mid-1920s, Negatív had become known as the murder district. The details are a bit hazy, but it's estimated that 50 to 300 people were ultimately killed with the strategy taught by Zsuzsanna. Part of the reason the details are so hazy is because Zsuzsanna was the closest thing the town had to a doctor, not to mention that her cousin was the person in charge of filing the death certificates. These two factors combined to allow the majority of murders to be covered up or misreported. There are several different versions of how the women in the village were actually caught, but the most credible version is that an anonymous letter was sent to a small local newspaper. The letter gave a seemingly absurd explanation for the mass number of suspicious deaths in Negatív. Most of the women in the village are poisoning people to death on a whim. It sounded pretty unbelievable. However, this was enough to inspire an investigation. Local authorities exhumed over 20 corpses from the local cemetery and found insane levels of arsenic in their bodies. Levels so high that only intentional poisoning could be responsible. After the investigation, 34 women and 1 man were indicted for the murders. 26 women actually went to trial, including Zsuzsanna. 8 of the women received a death sentence, but only 2 of them were executed. The others died before execution or had their sentences commuted to just imprisonment. No more angels were being made by these women. Thank you all very much for listening. If you found this video interesting, leave a like or subscribe for more, and I will catch you guys next time.